Viltrox has just sent me their E-mount 27mm f1.2 lens to test and review with my Sony ZV-E10. Here is a short sequence to show you what I was able to achieve with this setup. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that little sequence. Anyway, let me share with you my overall thoughts about this lens after using it for a couple of weeks in combination with my Sony ZV-E10 and ZV-E1. Starting with the build quality, this lens is made entirely of metal, including the lens mount, but unfortunately not the lens hood. The lens hood is made of plastic. Also, it has a rubber gasket on the lens mount and multi-layer rubber seals inside the lens, which makes it weather sealed, allowing you to use it in harsh conditions. However, it's quite large and hefty, measuring 92 centimeters long and 82 centimeters wide and weighing 610 grams with the lens hood attached. However, this is an f1.2 lens, and like I said, the build quality is fantastic, so the size and weight are justifiable. It does feel a bit weird in terms of balancing with the ZV-E10. It's quite front heavy, but I would rather have a solid metal build quality lens that is slightly heavy than a cheap plastic build quality lens that is slightly lighter. Let me know down below what you prefer, a plastic build quality lens or a metal build quality lens. Anyway, other features this lens offers include an autofocus manual focus switch, a programmable function button which you can customize with pretty much any modern Sony camera, a very smooth aperture ring that ranges from f1.2 to f16 with a declickable function switch, a USB-C port on the lens mount for firmware upgrades, a 67mm filter thread, and a very smooth focus ring. Also, this lens has a very long focus throw, which means that you'll need to rotate the focus ring quite a lot to manually focus from close to infinity. From my experience, it takes about 3 180-degree rotations to focus from close to infinity with this lens, which is kinda a lot, especially when I compare it to something like my Sony 35mm f1.8, which only takes 1 180-degree rotation to focus from close to infinity. But honestly, I prefer this feature because it makes manually focusing much easier and more precise, especially for video work, but I'm not sure how it's going to work for photography. Moving on to minimum focus distance, this lens has a minimum focus distance of 28 centimeters, which can be handy for close-up shots. And from my tests, it delivers sharp results at the minimum focus distance, even when shooting wide open at f1.2. I'm mentioning this because usually this is not the case with cheap budget lenses. Pretty much all the budget lenses I've reviewed suffered from soft image quality when shooting wide open at the minimum focus distance, but this is not the case at all with this lens. As for autofocus performance, from my tests, this lens performed really well on my Sony ZV-E10 and ZV-E1 when tracking subjects and quickly focusing from close to infinity. I would say the performance is pretty much as good as my native Sony lenses. I didn't notice any kind of focus hunting, artifacts, or even focus noise. This lens is dead silent when autofocusing. However, I want to mention something very important. For the first couple of days of using this lens, I had a weird autofocus transition issue. You can even see it on one of the clips I showed you in the sequence at the beginning of the video. I didn't know why I had this issue because I tried this lens on my Sony ZV-E10 and it was working flawlessly without any autofocus transition issues and stuff. And then I thought maybe I should check for a firmware upgrade on the Viltrox website, and indeed there was a newer firmware upgrade. So basically I downloaded that firmware, installed it in the lens, and it completely resolved all the issues I had with the autofocus. So basically my point is that if you're going to buy this lens, as soon as you open it, as soon as you take the lens out from the package, check if there is a new firmware upgrade, because it's going to solve you so many problems when it comes to autofocus and stuff. And the last thing I want to mention about focus is focus breathing. Unfortunately, this lens suffers quite badly from focus breathing. You can definitely notice it on the sides of the frame. So if you enjoy doing focus pulling or stacking shots, this might not be the best option for you. All right, now let's talk about optics. First of all, this is a 27mm APS-C lens, which is equivalent to about 40mm in full frame terms. This focal length is great for general photography, videography, gimbal work, talking head shots, interview shots, street photography, and much more. It's a very versatile focal length, and it's the sweet spot, in my opinion, between 35mm and 50mm. In terms of optical performance, this lens really delivers, especially for the price of just $545. As you can see in this image, it's very sharp when shooting wide open at f1.2 with some major vignetting, but that's to be expected from an f1.2 lens. Stopping down to f1.8 almost completely eliminates vignetting, and the sharpness barely improves. This just goes to show you how sharp this lens really is. There's barely a difference between f1.2 and f1.8 in terms of sharpness. And finally, stopping down to f4 completely eliminates vignetting, and the image is stuck sharp across the entire frame. In terms of chromatic aberration, this lens barely has any, even when shooting wide open in a very contrasty scene. Here is a quick comparison to my Sony 35mm f1.8. As you can see, the Viltrox lens produces much cleaner results. It's actually quite amazing. In terms of color reproduction, in my opinion, this lens is quite neutral. Here's a side-by-side comparison again with my Sony 35mm f1.8, and as you can see, the Viltrox lens has a bit more magenta color to it, but honestly it looks a bit more neutral to me than the green-yellow color the Sony 35mm produces. Finally, in terms of bokeh, I'm not really an expert, but I like the bokeh this lens produces. It has a spherical look to it, which reminds me of Zeiss lenses, and overall I really like it. Also, I've tested this lens on my Sony ZV-E10 and it worked just fine as long as I had the clear image zoom set to about 1.2, 1.3. Otherwise, there was strong vignetting. So if you want to use this lens with a full frame camera, you can definitely do so, but with a clear image zoom of about 1.2 or 1.3, which will make this lens roughly 33mm. Anyway, the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 lens is phenomenal, especially at just $545. It has solid build quality, excellent autofocus performance, sharp and crisp image quality, and a very unique Zeiss-like look. If you're looking for a low light slash b-roll slash talking head slash interview lens that produces great results, I highly recommend this one. The only downside really of this lens is that it's bulky and heavy, but that's the trade-off you'll have to pay for an f1.2 lens with a solid build quality. Anyway, this lens is available for Fuji, Nikon, and Sony, and it's only $545. I'll leave links for it down below. And while you're there, feel free to leave a question or a comment in the comment section. Thanks for watching.